We are getting a new creative team on Amazing Spider-Man. It's not Justina Ireland, which a lot of people had kind of said behind the scenes, but it is one of the writers from 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, and a new artist we weren't really expecting. Marvel Comics will relaunch its flagship, The Amazing Spider-Man series in 2025. Along with a new #1 issue comes a brand new status quo for Peter Parker, as the perpetually down on his luck hero struggles to find a new job and faces the return of a villain he hasn't battled in years. As revealed by Polygon, the new series will be written by Spider-Man veteran Joe Kelly, who is also writing the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man storyline in the current volume of ASM. The series will be drawn by Pepe Larraz and longtime Spider-Man artist John Romita Jr. Joe Kelly, returning to Spider-Man, certainly has had some very high moments in the past, but as of late, I have been very, very unimpressed by Joe Kelly's work. He almost feels like late stage Neil Adams, to where his stories are just kind of all over the place. It kind of started out with Nonstop Spider-Man, which I think becomes Savage Spider-Man. And then more recently, he did that Deadpool Wolverine WW3, which looks amazing with the Kubert art, but reads like crap. And right now we're in 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, and I don't even know what the story is about at this point. It's so freaking confusing, and it does feel like Joe Kelly might have lost his magic.
And you could be right. I mean, you've had a lot of writers over the years that's happened to, as you mentioned, Neil Adams, where it just got batshit insane. Christopher Priest. I mean, I remember reading that U.S. Agent miniseries he did a couple of years ago. It was hard as hell to really understand what the hell's going on. It's like they still remember all the great parts of how to do comics, but like the slow parts where it like kind of builds that tension, they don't either care to do anymore, or they don't effectively do it. And it ends up coming off as just utter nonsense half the time. And that's kind of how he's felt, like Nonstop Spider-Man. Yes, the title definitely described the book. It was non-fucking stop. But at the same time, holy shit, was that a difficult book to keep understanding of where the plot's going, because he just throw a new plot element in.
Yeah, so I am more apprehensive about this, although I will freely admit Joe Kelly is certainly a better choice than Justina Ireland, who's never actually successfully written a comic book. So at least he has a track record of success, certainly with Spider-Man. A lot of people, when they think of Joe Kelly, they do think of Deadpool. And so certainly he has a track record of success. So at least there's somebody that knows potentially how to write comic books. It just doesn't feel like he's in his element right now.
Again, I feel like that has a lot to do with the fact that in recent years, he's been brought in on very, very small projects. And when he does get the opportunity, feels like he puts a lot of pressure on himself to just get through all of the huge plot that he wanted, but he only has 5 issues or 3 issues or 6 issues to do it in. And it's like 12 issues worth of plot. And unfortunately, the storytelling suffers as a result. So maybe with a ongoing where he doesn't feel that same level of pressure, he can really shine again. I don't know. I'm really kind of curious to see. And I would love to be shown that his more recent forays at Marvel are more of an aberration and a consequence of Marvel being stuck in a everything's a fucking miniseries mentality, and really kind of go hog wild on an ongoing book where he doesn't have that same 6-issue, 5-issue, 3-issue restraint.
Now, certainly they are prioritizing this. It is Amazing Spider-Man. They're putting Pepe Larraz on there. The last few projects of him that have been big. He did do Blood Hunt. Before that, he did House of X. But he hasn't done like an ongoing interior work for a really long time. I don't expect Pepe Larraz to be associated with this book after like 6 months.
I haven't figured out whether that is him not wanting to or Marvel wanting to keep shuffling him around because he has the potential to really become a superstar artist. And again, they are always terrified that if they actually let a artist become a legit superstar, they're going to leave them in the lurch. So instead, they just don't give them the work in the first place, which seems really, really stupid. I would really like to see him take a long, long run on this, primarily because, look, I know I make fun of the guy for just being a Stuart Immonen clone, but he is a legit great artist. he just doesn't stick around on projects long enough. And I don't know if that's his choice or editorials, but based on his track record, I'd say, yeah, he's probably not going to be on there long. It feels like another case of Marvel putting the closest thing they have to an actual star artist on a book just to then rug pull it on the readership, like Stegman over on X-Men right now.
Well, I think it's going to be more than monthly because there's two artists. John Romita Jr. is also sticking around. I don't particularly think that he was presenting himself well during that Zeb Wells run. Certainly the bad stories hurts his art because you're not buying into the story. It makes the art seem worse, but it didn't feel like he was elevating much.
When he wants to draw the scripts he's given, I feel like he's actually still got it, but he's no longer able to fake the funk when it comes to shitty scripts that he doesn't want to actually draw. That's when it seems like the more negative John Romita Jr., the less inspired and more paint by numbers John Romita Jr. comes out. I can only hope that with an actual comic book writer, maybe he's giving him scripts that Romita's going to actually want to draw, and he's going to put in that effort again.
Bare minimum, the art changes will be jarring because those guys are not even close to being the same style. Now, we do have some information on what Peter Parker Spider-Man is going to get up to. Peter Parker is once again facing an uphill battle to find a job while also dealing with the return of the Rhino. However, this iconic villain is just the tip of the iceberg, as it seems a shadowy mastermind is manipulating Spidey into a conflict with some of his biggest villains. One of those villains is a character fans haven't seen in 7 years. The book will also heavily focus on recently redeemed and goblin-free Norman Osborn, as well as Peter's new girlfriend, Shay. Now, obviously, the more interesting thing is there is a mention of a villain that Peter Parker hasn't fought in 7 years. 7 years, this book is going to come out in 2025. We got to go back to 2018. That is when the Dan Slott run ended and the Nick Spencer run began. I'm assuming that's Red Goblin. Do you have any other options for that 7-year villain that he hasn't fought?
It could be Doc Ock. I don't recall Doc Ock being really involved. I feel like that's distinctly possible. I think you could be right. It could be the Red Goblin. It was another one of Slott's just shove in another variant on an existing character that he was famous for throughout his run. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be Red Goblin, especially since it's not really a real villain. It's just a variant on an existing villain. And I feel like that's not something that they'd really hype at this point.
Definitely not looking forward to a heavy focus on redeemed and goblin-free Norman Osborn anymore. I'm kind of tired of that character, and it's kind of played out. I wish he would just kind of go away for 10 years and come back as a bad guy.
I'm tired of villains getting redeemed and then becoming the central focus of a fucking comic book, especially the Nemesis character becoming the central part of a book that's not about them, and it's mostly historically been about kicking their ass.
Do you want Peter Parker in a relationship with anybody other than MJ at this point? At this point, I think I'm at the point where, like, screw you guys, I'm not accepting anything.
Yeah, I feel like that's where most of us are. I mean, we're just going to start hating them more and more because they're not MJ, especially when we had the rug pulled out from under us. Maybe Joe Kelly is one of the writers that could possibly redeem the character, but them deciding we're better off just as friends. And then hopefully she just vanishes into the background of girls that Peter dated and they decided they were better friends and then were never seen again, because that's where she should fall into, basically the dustbin of girlfriends past. I feel like this is a Nick Lowe editorial mandate. You know, it wouldn't be surprised to find out that he created Shay. He definitely created Paul. That's his cuck fetish. But it wouldn't surprise me that to find out he created Shay and he's just forcing that character to stay in the comics as long as he's the editor, just so we'll stop bitching about MJ.
Speaking of Nick Lowe, he had some words about this that kind of confirmed a few things. Amazing Spider-Man editor Nick Lowe described his choice to hire Kelly as the new regular writer on the series. I didn't think we could get Joe for a substantial run on Amazing Spider-Man. He's always so busy with animation and television and movies, so he usually just dips in and out of comics. That's why we tapped him for the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. So when he asked if we consider him for being the ongoing writer, I felt like I won the lottery. So he wasn't the initial choice. In fact, I think they went into 8 Deaths of Spider-Man without a choice and he just happens to be willing to stick around. So I guess it was good luck on his part.
Feel like maybe Joe probably felt a little disconnected from the comic book world in the last few years. That seemed to be where his passion always laid. Him being so disconnected and not involved in comics for so long, he probably hated it. So him getting together and being able to do a ongoing monthly run for an extended period of time, letting him really stretch his creative legs again. We're fortunate enough, especially as ASM fans, that have been suffering for, the last, 3 years under Zeb Wells, after a pretty good run by Nick Spencer that followed up again, suffering period with Slaughter Bloctavius.
And it definitely could have been worse, because the first few names I was hearing were like Collin, Kelly, and Jackson Lanzing. And then obviously the other name that had been kind of proliferating around was Justina Ireland. And I don't think she's made a good introduction to Spider-Man fans.
We reviewed the issue last week, or what was last week or 2 weeks ago, where it was very obvious she had no interest in actually writing the story that was being told in the 8 Deaths story. Instead, she wanted to just do her whatever slice of life bullshit. I feel like she was going to be the writer until Joe said, I want to stay longer. And now she's back onto the bench. She'll be substituted in on some other book. Don't know, don't care. Keep her as far the fuck away from ASM as possible. And same with a lot of the other jabroni writers. Because, let's be honest, the reason why we were hearing about those jabroni writers is because Marvel doesn't have a Rolodex anymore. Nobody will work for them. The fact that Joe Kelly still has, I guess, a masochistic bone in his body to go back and do regular work with Marvel, we're fortunate. I just hope the retards in charge like Nick Lowe don't get in the way and piss him off so that he does leave. Let him do what he's going to do. Maybe we'll all get rewarded with good, interesting Spider-Man stories for the first time in at least 3 or 4 years. And Marvel will get rewarded by, I don't know, selling fucking comics.
Do want to say thank you very much to Doc for joining me today, talking about the new creative team on Amazing Spider-Man. It could have been so much worse. We'll see how it plays out. Although Joe Kelly has been in a bit of a dry spell, perhaps he just needed a little bit more time to cook. If you would like the entire conversation that Doc and I had, as well as our entire review of Ultimate Spider-Man number 12, you do need to visit us on Think Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description. The Doc is right here, the Doc Unfiltered podcast, and you also get the Doc Q&A as well, and other fun treats to go along with that on the Patreon. Hope to see you there very, very soon.